This is Shorthammer. It is the 17th of April, 2022, and this is Trading Zones. Last week was interesting. I think quite a few people, with the way the week began, thought we were going to break out and really run. But into the end of the week, that proved to not be the case. And looking at the RTY, what we see here, we did move away from the 1960s to the 1990s, up into the 2008s, above the 2019s. But as we went above the 2019s here, you could see sort of these candles begin to just not look as strong, right? And you don't see, and this is what's interesting. Look back on the 12th of April, where we had this big buy candle, right? And this buy candle erased a lot of this downward movement from the 6th of April on. Look at that. Look how many days we're just kind of grinding. And then one 4-hour candle just erased so much of that, right? Then the next candle just sort of sold back down. And then we had sort of a bounce near the bottom, the 1976 area here, the bottom of this green candle. And we sort of bought back up, right? But as we begin to approach this area where previously, right, back on the 12th, buyers couldn't find oxygen. Like, the air is getting thin. There wasn't an increase in volume and an increase in frequency of buying here. Sort of, where are the bids? Where are the buyers? Push this up. We couldn't. So if you just held your cursor right here around 2026, right here, right about there, right, 2026. Now look across that line. How many candles on the 4-hour chart closed above that? 0. Isn't that interesting? And so if you wanted to draw a line across there, right, and this is how you look at things, like, look for patterns. It's always interesting. If I was able to put this right at roughly, that's roughly the area right here, right? Nothing closed above that. Where? And so what that's telling you, if you're using a 4-hour chart, if you're using a 5-minute chart, if you're using a 15-minute chart, 10-minute chart, 4-day chart, 4-year chart, doesn't matter what you're using, right? Whatever time frame that you're using, when you see this pattern, so the pattern shows you there are no buyers above this area, this 2025, I'll say 2026. I don't know why I have the 2025, but there's no buyers above this area, regardless, right? Above this area, the air is thin. There's no strength. So what you'd wait for if you were trading this, looking at this chart, you would wait for something to close above this to show you something different, and then give you a secondary bullish pattern above that, right? And you wanted to see increase in volume. That's what you want to see. So when you don't see this, you're waiting. So technically, right? Technically, depending on how you trade, for some people, they would, if they don't see a strong break of this area, then they would be looking, and you could even, if this line even extended back to here, right? Technically, the last time we had a close above that 2025 was back on the 6th of April. And look at this. It's just weakness. Where's the strength? And so a buy back up into this area, you're just looking across and you're waiting to see the strength. You don't see it. So that's just interesting, right? So however you do it, right? So if you're following this trend line and you saw a boom, buy here, back test here, and you wouldn't draw this trend until the second contact, right? And you'd watch to see what happens on the third contact. And usually the third contact is where you look for your entry. So if you were to jump in here around this 1990 line, so it would have gone against you about 5 points or so, 4 or 5 points or so. But then it went the other direction with some strength, and that would have paid off. So if you were playing that, that would be interesting, right? So here we see boom, 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 multiple interactions with this downtrend line that's freshly drawn. We want to see what this next candle does. So what we want to look for on this next candle, this is moving forward. I'm getting out of the sort of the chart setup. I apologize. I really love candlestick patterns and I love these levels and these. I love when I look at charts and I see stuff like this, gets me excited. But let me stop charting out and get back to our discussion. So this next candle, what you want to see is, can we get above this little downtrend line here, right? And so if the candle, and this is what could play out, back tests through this 1990 and up here against this 2014 point, you want to see if we can go sideways here and get above this downtrend. And if we can get above this 2008, that does open up push into the 2019. But if you see more selling and we just dip down here and we don't see any strength up through the 1990s, which is the first thing that we need to see, then you have to be careful if we don't see negative drift down to the 1990s here. So you want to see a buy up to the 2008s. And if we don't see that, look for negative drift down to the 1990s. And another thing to consider, right, is remember we're coming into the end of the week where we had a, let's say a holiday weekend, right? So the volume is kind of interesting. So what we want to see is, was it that there were people that usually would have been buying that were absent, and that's why we sort of saw the market capitulate on Thursday? And so we want to see if this continues, right? And keep in mind that there's a ton of headline risk, right? And I'll come back to that. So we got to watch the 1990s, 1962. Last time we dipped down here, we saw buyers step in around 1977. And you see that's coinciding with this candle here from the 12th. That's interesting. And then down here, saw the double tap around the 1967 area. So there's just a few areas where you see a double tap. We want to see what we get on the selling back down to the downside, and if the 1990s hold, or if we can jump back over to 2008s and see what happens there. But those are a few areas to watch on your charts to see what happens. This right here is the 200, and usually when we're below the 200, regardless of the time frame, I'm wondering sort of whether it's the 200, whether it's the 20 or the 50. Whatever the EMA, I'm looking to see whatever the moving average may be. I'm looking to see how buyers and sellers interact with those points, and the inability. I always look at to either sell below or to be able to buy above. It's something. It's not everything, but it's something to keep an eye on. Let's go ahead and jet on over to the MES. All righty. So looking at the MES, so if we're looking at the MES, I think they're playing tackle. Tackle football upstairs. It's hilarious. So if we're looking at the MES, if you just look at this setup, right, and everyone has a different way of viewing charts. That's what's interesting. Everyone has a different way of viewing charts. So me, when I look at this on the 4-hour, I'm like, is this like a janky M pattern? And yes, it's coming at the end of a downtrend. But if you remember what we mentioned yesterday, right? What we talked about was we were seeing lower highs and lower lows, lower high, lower low. And we were wondering like, is this a potential lower high? What's the answer to that? Yes, it was. And we made a lower low, right? And then so now we're like, okay, we're going back up here. This is a lower high again. We did not make a lower low on this sort of wave back down. And it's weird because of the candle structure that this isn't sort of more candles in this. But the each test here So this wave back up is a lower high again. And we have to see if this is a lower low or if this is sort of a bottom here, right? Right around this 4380s area. If this is a bottom that they're hammering out, we have to see, right? And so that will be interesting. That'll be something that'll be interesting to watch to see if that's a bottom that's being hammered out there. And this is on the MES. And I'm a Qs person. I love the Qs. But we have to see how this plays out because this is very, very interesting. And so if we do make a lower low here, and if you're looking at this as a janky M pattern, right? Just a super janky M pattern right up in here. And I would, let me see. I am super horrible with this. I'm not going to lie, but I'll try to see if I can make this look okay. So if we're going like this, I'll drag that up. Told you, horrible. This. And if this is the case, right? Told you I'm horrible with it, so don't judge me. Horrible with it. If this is an M pattern and this area here is sort of the area that we're watching to see if we break back below and we get a sell back through here, then I'll be looking for probably a 200 to 300 point drop here, if not more, right? And so we have to see how that works out, right? Let me measure this because I may be looking at this. So like about 100 point drop or so, area to area, roughly about 100 point drop. So we have to see how this plays out, right? And so 100 points from here is down here around the 4280s. We'll have to see, maybe not. But this could be a bottoming area. Last touch, what do? We bought up this area. We have no closes, right? And it's basically equivalent. So this 4387.50 was the close that we had on the or is the low on the 11th of April. We're seeing 6 o'clock. We opened up. So that was the close for that day. Or I mean for that candle was right around there. It was 43. Let me see, where are we? 4387.50. We'll get this off of here. Get out of there. You're so I actually need to remove this altogether. And so 4387.50. And this one we closed at 84.50. So hold on, that can't be. Why am I looking at this? It's maybe right. Yep, 4384.75. So roughly in the same area, right? So we just want to see if so we closed at 4388.50. My fault. So right in the same area. So we want to see if we can get a gap up out of this area, that would really be interesting. And the reason why that would be interesting is that that's a previous area where we saw that we had move that all together and get rid of this, because that's not going to be. I look at, I see this stuff clearly. I don't need to draw it there. It's just going to mess with me reading these candles. But we saw that buyers kept stepping in, right? So what we want to see, if you look at all these candles, you don't see a single candle that's below the 4380s as far as the close of that candle, just from the 11th of April on. So I want to see, do we get bearish below this level or is it defended? So I think that's going to be interesting. And if you want to look back here, look at this little breakout area here, right around the 17th of March. Look at this. Curved under, we held, and look at this break, right? This breakthrough. Look at that strength. And now we're back down here again. And so what we want to see is, will the buyers defend that? So that's interesting, right? How many buyers are at this level? That's always something interesting for people to get into that. So we'll see. We shall see. But I want to see how this plays out. If they hold here, then we're going to go back up and we'll back test up here in the 4400s. We won't see how this plays out. So that's interesting to me. My fault it took so long on that. But just looking at that candle structure, I think that that's an interesting thing to view, especially headed into earnings, right? And same thing here again, right? You can see that crazy little M pattern here, how this looks right here. So up here, then here again. And so we want to see the difference is the M&NQ is a little bit weaker and it's low. It's a lower close than the close from the 11th of April. Look at that. We're lower. So will we see an extension of the selling here? And will this drop with the M&NQ point to point? If we're saying that this is a potential M pattern, a janky one at that, but a janky M pattern, will we see a 300, 400 point drop here, right? So that's interesting, something that I'm going to be watching to see what the sellers do. Do we see continuation to the downside, or was it because we're... So that's something that I definitely want to be able to see. I'll be keeping an eye on here. And so we'll see how that plays out. But the levels that we're going to be watching here, we're right around the 13,890s, 13,873 is the bottom of this area. Do we hold this and do we buy back up? If we sell below this, keep your eye open for the 13,818s by 13,793. That's the next level I'll be keeping an eye on. And below that, 13,7, what is this? I believe this is the 90s. Nope, that is the 50s. Yikes. 13,757 by 13,726. So just watch these levels. I could broaden this out. If you want to add this to your charts, it's by choice, right? I just watch these levels to see if we get any strong reactions in there. But for me, it's not really a big deal, to be honest, right? It's not something that that on my intraday trading, like I keep an eye on it overall. And when I see the intraday chart react at levels on my from the higher time frame 4-hour chart, that's what it makes me more decisive on my entries and exits. That's really it. So let's keep it moving, but definitely watch that. If we buy back up above the 13,940s by 13,950s, we get back above that, then we want to see if we can get a little bit more more buying or buyers to drive us back out of these 1300s altogether and back into the 1400s. But the way this is looking, if we don't see a gap up here at around 6 on the overnight session, this might get interesting. So that will be something to watch. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And remember, we have a ton of headline risks. Even though we have earnings going on, there was expected, from what I understood, for there to be a pullback in the market just based on the rise in interest rates and the Fed trying to get inflation under control, right? So whatever these earnings are going to be, whatever they're going to be saying, hey, we our guidance is X or our guidance is Y, I would expect a lot of companies to guide down, not just because of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and the squeeze and the inflation that's pushing into the food market, right? With I think it's like 30% of the grain from the world, right, globally is coming out of Ukraine and Russia. That's interesting, right? But the constraints that could put on supply chains, right? Not just from those countries that are involved, but the allies of those countries. And when you start to look at the different things that are going on to try to punish the different countries that are involved in that, whether it be sanctions or anything else, that does impact supply chains. So it's not only the countries that are involved in this that are being impacted, but it's a ripple effect. And the impact on other countries, the impact of millions of people migrating from one country to the next, the people that are going into Poland and the stress that puts on Poland, and then how all the other NATO allies have to support Poland with that influx of people. So I think there's just so many other, I'll say, tentacles to the entire Ukraine-Russia situation, just from a trading perspective, right? Not from a humanitarian perspective, not from a holistic perspective, just from a trading perspective, There's so many unknowns, and there's so many financial institutions that are sort of caught in this, that the way that they're managing their companies is being impacted by the sanctions and being impacted by which countries are following the sanctions, which countries are not following the sanctions, and how they interact with all that, and supply chains, all these things. It's all happening, all these headline risks, and we're headed into earnings, right? With record inflation in most countries, all these things that are happening, and the federal government's trying to manage monetary policy. There are just so many variables that I think this is a challenge. And so just be careful and watch your six, whatever positions that you're in, be careful, because there are a lot of unknowns right now. I believe a lot of unknowns in the market. So watching Amazon, and keep it moving. Not gonna go on a soliloquy. Watch the 30-20, see if we sell below that. If we go back to the 11th of April, which is, I believe, Monday. I think that was Monday, but yeah. We didn't really see accelerated selling below this area, right? And if we go back even further, look here at the 30-20s back on the 28th of February, all through here, we're seeing we had this sort of play here where we're kind of flagging, and then we boom exploded to the upside, but we ran head first into this 3085 area, and multiple days we couldn't get any bullish action above that, right? And so we pull back down here around the 30-20s, and the buyers were trying to find the momentum to just drive us through, and they just couldn't, right? Reload, just couldn't get us up through there until finally we weakened and we sold. So this is interesting, right? To see if the buyers are going to try to reload us on the 30-20s and drive us back up into the 30-80s. That's something to watch for. If we have some candles that close below that, I think that's interesting. Maybe the buyers are no longer there. And so maybe this area then turns into an area of supply. So we saw here when we came back down, first tested the 30-20s. What did the buyers do? Stepped in, drove us back up. Back here again, drove us back up. Like, let's break. So they tried to push the 30-80s here, and they were trying to, like, let's go next level. And just the weight of the headlines and news, we're back down again, and we're going to be testing the 30-20. So on Amazon, the 30-20s is an important area to watch to see if the buyers are still there, one, and two, if the buyers are not there and we sell through, does this previous area that was, I would consider, a pretty strong demand area now become an area of supply, right? Where now sellers begin to load up to try to keep the buyers below that line because they gave up the line there. So that's interesting. Or gave up that area there, this little demand pocket. So that's interesting to watch on Amazon, in my opinion. Let's keep it moving. I got a couple of complaints from the last video because I don't believe I popped Tesla in. I'm going to be sure to pop Tesla in today. So if we're looking at at Microsoft, let's see what we've got. Let's look at these charts. Let's scrunch it up, make it easier to see the levels. Okay, Doki Artichoke 276. Nice push up here, back down. Look at the back test in here, all the way across. See the levels here. 17th March is interesting. So where we are here, it looks like we can easily see a sell. And isn't this weird? This is how you look at candle patterns and charts, and this is awesome. Okay, so let's look here, right? Look at where we are right now. And let's go back and let's see where we were on the 11th of March, roughly the same area. And so there's a pause here. So my expectation is, let's see if we sell below. If so, let's keep our eye open for a test of the 276.20 or 276.12 or just 276s, right? Let's see if we see that from this area. Do we sell down to 276? If not, and we buy back up, does it take us back into the 283, 284 level? And so that's something to watch here. And if we can get there, can we get a rise potentially back up through the 286s into the 288s? I kind of don't think that might happen, but this is the thing, right? To remember, this is sort of the wild card portion, separate from all the headlines that's going on with inflation, the war, and interest rates, right? This is a separate thing here. I mean, rise of interest rates really hurts tech stocks usually, right? So this is the other thing that's really interesting here. Usually when you're heading into earnings, there's sort of a little bump in the market, especially tech stocks. You see them begin to buy up headed into earnings. And so that's another competing narrative, right? That we have to watch for. Like, so sort of 30 to 45 days headed into our earnings sometimes, actually many times, you'll see a ticker begin to buy up. And so that's something to watch here on the tech stocks, is if we'll get an artificial bounce headed into earnings just based on the excitement around earnings, but with all the headline risks and also the inflation and interest rates and all that craziness, right? Are a lot of these companies going to potentially miss on their earnings and also potentially guide down? So this is all very, very interesting as we sort of watch the close into or into earnings. We want to see how this goes as we run into earnings. Okay, so over to Apple. So if I'm looking at Apple, the you see I have lines way down here, 149 line up here. Yeah, and then I'm funny with Apple. Then 170. I have a line like 171.21, I think, on Apple that I have. It doesn't. So all my lines don't show on all time frames, and I have some lines that only show on the lower time frames. But I do have some lines on Apple at the 171.21, which is usually an area that I watch to see if we're going to go long or short on that. And that's the area I usually watch on Apple, but it's not showing on this chart. So 170.07 is interesting. We see multiple interactions with that line. We're now below. And so what we want to see is, let's go back. So previously, sold below, right? Look at this pattern. So watch this pattern. We're up. So this looks like a janky M pattern, right? If we're looking at this, and this is from the date range from 31st of January 2022 to roughly the 10th of February 2022. Looks like a janky M pattern, right? And then we dip below the line. We buy right back up above the 170.07 line. It's a lower low. So we have, this is a lower low than this area here. And so when you see, when you see this, small candles and sort of a rounded top, that's sort of a sign that you look for to see if we're going to go lower, right? That's interesting to me, but let me keep it moving. See that again here. Just like we can't get oxygen above this. That's interesting, right? So this is, if you consider this a potential M pattern, right? And then we sell down, buy back up again, and away we go, right? Remember, we bought back up again here, right around the 14th of February. So let's come forward a little bit, right? So this is something to watch. So we're above the 170.07, janky M pattern, sell below the line, buy back up, not quite as strong, but this was a stronger dip than the last time. And then we sell back below. This last sell below here, when we went back up and we came back down, took us all the way down here around the 153 area. So the question is this pattern going to play out again, right? Above the 170.07, topped out, sold through, bought back above, and we're selling back down. Will this play out again? And will this result in a tag of the 150s? That's something that's interesting to watch here on Apple. But remember, we have a lot of earnings coming, so it's going to be interesting, a lot of headline risks. But that's something to potentially watch for Apple. Is will this pattern play out again? Keep it moving. Straight over into Netflix. If you remember Netflix, last week we were talking about the 365 area, I believe. And now we're down here, right around the 343s. And this looks like we're going to see a little bit lower, maybe into the 330s here. Look at that swing low in there, this area here. So that's interesting because this I don't see where we'd see strength in Netflix for it to buy back up. But this area, if we look at the 343s, we dipped below, saw a little reversal here, and then a push back up into the 360s, almost a 366 area. And then it kind of went even lower, right? So this is an area that, it looks like initial test. The buyers did try to defend it and we did pull back, didn't quite reach the 354 area. And then we're back to it again. So I think this may open up the 330. So keep an eye on that. That's definitely interesting. So for me, looking at this area, the buyers really need us to get us back over the 343 area and give us a pop with the 350s to open up the 360s. So they really need to try to get over the 343s and hold this area here, right? And we'd watch it down through the 338 area, but this looks like we may sell. So just watch the overall market and just watch, I'll say, the headlines, but be careful. Be careful. Be careful. Netflix has a lot more competition now. There are a lot more streaming services that are just battling them for eyeballs. And, so it's a huge challenge now. Everybody is sort of watched what Netflix does, and they're copying some of the best parts of Netflix, right? And avoiding some of the pitfalls of Netflix. So that's one of the funny things about being the industry lead, right? When you're the first out of the gate, everyone gets to watch you fall on your face, right? So say someone's running around a track and you watch them step in all these potholes and then you know where not to go. And there are upsides to being first, but there are also some challenges if you have people that are coming in that have enough ingenuity in financing. And especially if what you're doing isn't like what's Netflix moat? Branding. They really, like, if you think about what's Netflix moat, is branding. So then you're battling over branding and you're battling over price. And those things are, I think Disney Plus is great because it gives you such variety. I mean, Netflix does have a few things that are very different than what Disney Plus has. So I guess it's almost like if you have kids, you kind of need to have Netflix and Disney Plus. But it's just really interesting. So watch Netflix as they're, headed into earnings. We want to see how this plays out and if we continue to sell. Me personally, the week of earnings, I will not be in a stock that has earnings for that week. And I'm primarily focused on futures anyway, but I will definitely not be in a stock that, if it's earnings for that week, the chances of me being in, especially if it's a tech stock, are pretty low unless I am trying to sell some premium. And even if I'm selling premium, it'll be like verticals. I wouldn't be in anything naked. Just because you never know. But so looking at NVIDIA, we're right around the 212 area, which is really interesting. Look back here on the 8th of March, look back on the 15th of March, go back further to the 24th of February, back to the 24th of January and the 28th of January. In this area, buyers did step in, right? And so we want to see if that continues. It's possible. So you got to be careful if you're shorting Netflix in this area to see if there may not be pockets of buyers. So the best thing that we could see is a nice gap down. That would be great. To just get us through all these little lower wicks in this area. That'd be beautiful on NVIDIA. So keep an eye on it. We have a line here at 292, then a line at 181. Not sure if that's where we're going, but it's possible that could be where we're going. And just the way that this looks, there is a lot of pressure on the chip market. I believe there's another shortage, but inflation is just nuts right now. So I think the question is, how much are people willing to pay? Not just consumers, but also corporations, manufacturers. How much are you willing to pay for these materials? And the challenge is how much would consumers be willing to pay when you sort of team that with the Fed sort of pushing up interest rates, right, to battle inflation. So the cool thing about inflation for corporations, they get to charge, even though they may be paying a little bit more for supplies, um, they actually can charge more, right? So those numbers are big. The downside is that when inflation gets to a certain point, the Fed is going to battle it and raise interest rates, which usually puts the squeeze on the economy, where now finance and debt, people, sliding that credit card, and everything becomes just a little bit harder for people. They don't want to spend as much when those interest rates go up. So it has like a cooling effect, right? That's why if you look going forwards, companies may guide down just based on that. And that has nothing to do with all the other headline risks that we have, right? So that's interesting. So let's see. So I'll be watching this area to see if buyers do step in, or if we consider this, if we continue to sell. If we look at these 4-hour candles, there's not multiple days of continued selling in this area. We don't see much, right? Do we see a close here on what day is this? On the 24th of February, and then another one here on the 7th of March, but we don't see in another one here on the 14th of March. But what we don't see is multiple lower low candles, right? Lower low closes on the 4-hour chart on NVIDIA in this area, right? So let's see if that happens. We're in the 212s. So if this next 4-hour candle closes lower here, that'll be new. That will be new. And that will be something to watch. Do we get a lower close here out of this area? And so we'll see. We'll see if that happens. If we get another lower low candle and then a third one, that's what I'll be watching for. Do we get a third candle, and do we continue to sell down? So that's an interesting thing to watch on NVIDIA. Keep it moving. Head on over to Intel. So Intel being Intel, we're back above the 45, 44 area. If you look back, we do see we had some buys in the 45, 70s. So we'll see if we continue to sell over that sort of bounces and we get a pullback here. But the way that this is looking, we may see a little bit more downside. 45, 44 is a line, and we have 42.88. And below 42.88, we have 38.28. To the upside, we have 47.27, then 49.16. If you're just watching this, what we're seeing right now, as far as the waves, are lower lows and lower highs. And it would be great to get an up wave here, lower low, then we go back down. But Intel is weird, right? Intel has some crazy movements, but usually it's off of areas of supply and demand. So keep an eye on this. It usually gives you a slight hint of where it's going to go next. And that is interesting. Usually headed over to Tesla, and Tesla being Tesla. And I think I did I trade this? I did trade this a few times last week. The movements aren't as pronounced as they should be on Tesla. So we have to see what happens here. So we're below the 994, and we had to see if we buy up here. If we do, then we would watch out for the 1019, then the 1040. Above that, the 1114 is the next level I have. But I would just watch the last hitch, which is right here around 1074. We'll see how that plays out. If we continue to the downside, watch 969, 937, 857, then 819. Things are in an interesting place right now. If this is right and the earnings are sort of next week, I won't be touching Tesla. And the impact this is going to have on the Qs is going to be significant. So that's definitely something to watch, is all these tech earnings, and depending upon guidance, it can have a significant impact on the Qs, right? So we'll see how that plays out. Let's look at our baby CI that I did not even touch last week. And strength over strength, right? Look at that drive. Got the yearly pivots up here. That's gonna be interesting. So let's see what happens here. That looks like a strong rejection candle that we couldn't see. So all the way to 6.0 pullback. Look at that wick. That's a crazy wick. Usually when I see a wick like that, I am here. Oh, I'll be short. I'm not gonna lie. And my stop will be the top of this wick, right? But we'll see how that plays out. Intel can be, CI can be interesting, but we are back below the 259. Let's go back on this chart and see what we've got going on up there. Man, I have to check and see because that's nuts. But this area is an area where we can get a lot of movement. Look at that. It can go higher. Look at that. Yeah, get a lot of movement. So I got to be careful. I'll see how that plays out because it may be worth a one-to-one trade here, getting in and giving an opportunity to get down to the 255 area. That may be interesting. So we'll see how that plays out on CI. We'll see how that plays out. Well, have a wonderful week of trading. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Power of Pivots, where you can look forward to getting more videos from me about some of these levels, basically my watch list I'm keeping an eye on for the week, but also videos from Elisa as she goes through and shows how she looks for pre-market, intraday, and post-market setups using her Power of Pivots. I didn't get into pivots in this video, but I use them a lot. Like they really help me with my levels in my trading and keeps me out of some really bad trades. And the other thing to keep an eye on chips, because chips have been really funky. And if you keep an eye on chips, I'll say SMH, AMD, just keep an eye on chips. They have usually been the canary in the coal mine, just keeping an eye on those bad fellas, right? So thank you so much for your time. Please subscribe if you thought this video was helpful. Don't hesitate to shoot emails or message me if you have any questions or just any things that any tickers you'd like us to take a look at. Have a wonderful week of trading, and see you next week.